Today, we are diving deep into one of the most pivotal and frankly most debated prophecies in the entire Bible, the Abomination of Desolation. What is it? And maybe more importantly, when does it actually happen? Because the answer to that question might just reframe everything you thought you knew about the end times. So let's jump right in. The reason this event is so incredibly critical is because Jesus himself flags it for us. In Matthew chapter 24, verse 15, he says, "When you see the abomination of desolation standing in the holy place," and then he adds this little parenthetical, this instruction, let the reader understand. He's basically telling us, hey, pay attention. This is a big deal. You're going to need to dig into the scriptures to really get this. And that's exactly what we're going to do. Think of this as a kind of scriptural investigation. We're going to be detectives, looking at prophetic clues that are scattered across the books of Daniel and Matthew and Revelation to see if we can piece this puzzle together and assemble a timeline that actually makes sense of it all. Okay, so first things first, let's break down the traditional timeline. This is the view that for centuries most scholars have pointed to as the moment this prophecy gets fulfilled. The whole foundation for this traditional view comes straight from the prophet Daniel. In Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, we read that in the middle of the week he will put a stop to sacrifice. Now, this week is almost universally understood to be a 7-year period. So the middle of the week means the 3.5-year mark. So here's the crucial point in this timeline. The Abomination of Desolation is seen as the starting pistol, right? It's the one event that kicks off that final, terrible 3.5 years we all know as the Great Tribulation. It's a clean, straightforward sequence, but is it the whole picture? Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because when you start looking around at other prophecies, you find different numbers, different time markers that don't quite fit into this simple sequence. The math, well, it starts to get a little complicated. First up, we've got the number 42 months. The book of Revelation, specifically in chapter 11, verse 2, and again in chapter 13, verse 5, tells us pretty clearly that the beast will have authority to act, and that the holy city Jerusalem will be trampled underfoot for exactly 42 months. Now, in prophetic language, a month is usually counted as 30 days. So, if you do the math, 42 months is the exact equivalent of 1,260 days. And sure enough, Daniel also uses this number back in chapter 12, verse 7. He describes a period of persecution that lasts for a time, times, and half a time, which, you guessed it, adds up to 1,260 days. So far, so good. The numbers seem to match up. But then, just a few verses later, Daniel throws a major wrench in the works. In Daniel 12, verse 11, he says, "From the time that the regular sacrifice is abolished and the abomination of desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days." Hang on a second. 1,290? That's a full 30 days longer than the 1,260-day reign of the beast. What is going on here? You know, what's really fascinating here is the distinction the scripture seems to be making. The 42-month or 1,260-day period seems to describe the political domination of the city of Jerusalem. The nations are trampling the holy city. But the abomination, that's described as a specific act of sacrilege, a defilement that targets the temple itself. Could these be two separate, though obviously related, events? And that really is the central question, isn't it? If the beast's reign is 1,260 days, but the abomination kicks off a 1,290-day count, well, they can't happen at the same time. That simple midpoint theory suddenly starts to look a bit shaky. So how in the world do these pieces fit together? What if we stop trying to force the numbers to be the same? What if instead we just lay them out sequentially, one after the other? When you do that, something amazing happens. A completely different and maybe even more detailed timeline of the final days starts to emerge. Okay, just look at this reconstructed sequence for a second. The beast's 1,260-day reign begins, Jerusalem is trampled, but at the very end of it, something dramatic happens. Heaven itself announces a turning point. And then it's a full 30 days after the symbolic end of the beast's reign that he commits the abomination of desolation. In this view, it's not the start of his power at all. It's a final, desperate, enraged act of defiance. And this connects perfectly to what the Apostle Paul describes in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, the man of lawlessness, the beast. He physically walks into the holy place, the temple of God, sits down, and declares that he is God. I mean, it is the ultimate act of sacrilege, a direct, blasphemous challenge to heaven itself. So, if the Abomination of Desolation doesn't kick off a 3.5 year tribulation, then what even is the Great Tribulation? This new timeline really forces us to redefine it completely. Let's go back to Jesus' own words in Matthew chapter 24, verse 21, and notice what he really emphasizes. He doesn't actually specify the length of the tribulation at all. Instead, he focuses on its unparalleled severity. He says it will be a time of trouble unlike anything the world has ever seen or will ever see again. The defining characteristic is its sheer intensity, not its duration. And this slide right here shows the stark contrast. The traditional view holds to a tribulation that lasts 1,260 days. But remember Daniel's timeline? There was a third number. Blessed is he who keeps waiting and attains to the 1335 days. Well, what's the time between the abomination at day 1290 and this final blessing at day 1335? It's exactly 45 days. Could this be the true Great Tribulation? A brief but extraordinarily intense final crisis? So what happens in those 45 days? Revelation chapters 13 and 14 paint a pretty vivid and terrifying picture. The beast demands that everyone worship him, and those who refuse are killed. It is a final, terrible wave of martyrdom. But, crucially, Revelation 14 verse 13 says this: "Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on." In the face of ultimate evil, faithfulness even unto death is called a blessing from God. This short, severe tribulation doesn't just fizzle out, though. It leads directly to the ultimate climax of all of human history, the day of the Lord, and the glorious return of Jesus Christ. I just love this imagery from the prophet Hosea, chapter 11, verse 10. This is not some quiet, subtle return. When Christ appears, he will roar like a lion. It signifies an arrival with such overwhelming, undeniable power and authority that it will shake the kingdoms of this earth to their very foundations. And in that single moment, the great pretender is finished. The one who sat in the temple claiming to be God is just decisively and eternally overthrown. His brief, defiant, blasphemous reign comes to a sudden and final end. And this is the ultimate resolution. The rebellion is finally over. The authority of this world is transferred, and that declaration we heard about from Revelation chapter 11 becomes reality, the establishment of God's eternal kingdom, a kingdom that will have no end. And so we end with this final thought. If the final, most severe tribulation isn't a long, drawn-out marathon of 3.5 years, but a 45-day sprint of absolutely incredible intensity, how does that change the way we think about Jesus' command to be ready and to be watchful? It really suggests a crisis that could erupt with terrifying speed, demanding an immediate and unwavering faith. It's a powerful perspective to consider. Thanks for joining us.